Okay, now that you have successfully answered the pre-lab questions that tell me that you understand how to do this lab, we are going to determine the concentration of our unknown sodium chloride solution. So I have this unknown solution, and we're going to start by measuring out 20 milliliters of the solution with our graduated cylinder. And a graduated cylinder is always the right piece of equipment for measuring, as opposed to like a beaker, because it's much more precise. So I'm going to measure out 20 mils here. And in fact, I want to be as precise as I possibly can. So I'm going to use this little dropper to make sure I get my line exactly to the meniscus and I have exactly 20 milliliters, okay? Now, I'm going to put these 20 milliliters in an evaporating dish because I'm trying to find out how much salt is in here. So I'm going to evaporate the water and be left with the salt. But before I do that, I need to know the mass of the evaporating dish, because at the end of my experiment, I'm going to be left with salt in the evaporating dish, and it's going to be awfully hard to tell the mass if I don't have the mass of the dish. So the mass of the dish is 119.92 grams. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in my data table. So my data table shows the volume of solution, so we're going to write 20.0 milliliters. The mass of the empty evaporating dish is 119 well, now it's down to 91. We'll say 91 grams. All right? So now we can go back to our experiment, and now we can put the solution into the evaporating dish. Now, sometimes people really feel like at this point they should take the mass again. And you can, I mean, there's no harm, but the mass is not going to help us at all, because the mass of the solution is not part of the molarity equation. In the molarity equation, we need to know the moles of solute, and we'll divide that by the liters of solution. Now, we know the liters of solution, right? We can convert milliliters to liters. We need the moles only of the solute. So we're going to have to find out exactly how much sodium chloride is in here before we can calculate that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on the hot plate, and I'm going to let this come to a boil and start to evaporate. I'm going to pause because I don't think watching saltwater boil is going to be a really exciting time for you. And I will restart the recording once we've got some boiling going on. Okay, so you can see that this is bubbling away, and I'll try to move it a little closer so you can really see. It's steaming a ton. I know it's a little hard to see. I tried to change the lighting, but you can probably see that there are a few bubbles. And you probably can't see, but there's a little bit of salt forming around the edge. So I'll bring you back in just a minute when it's done and I'm ready to remove it from the hot plate so you can see what it looks like once all the salt is, once all the water's been evaporated and left behind the salt. So we're getting close to the end now, and it's mostly evaporated, and if I stop talking for a minute, you can probably hear it boiling, and you might see little pieces of salt popping out of the solution, and that's because it's pretty hot, and as we start to evaporate water, little chunks of salt can fly out too. So as the water boils, sometimes it takes a little piece of salt with it. So we'll see, once it gets all the way down to the bottom, you can actually hear the sound change, which is kind of interesting, and then I'll take it off the heat. The sound seems really urgent, like you need to take it off right now, but it's not. All right, so getting pretty low. Hopefully I won't drop the evaporating dish because that would be really awkward, but I don't think I will. Okay, getting close. I have my crucible tongs here to remove it. You can probably hear that crackling just a little bit. And it's about to get a lot louder. Clearly I overestimated a little how long this would take, so apologies for that. You're just, going to watch some water boil for about 30 more seconds, and then we'll take this off. Okay, so now our water is basically completely evaporated. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the hot plate, and then I'm going to remove it from the hot plate. And you can probably hear it crackling. And I'm just going to allow it to cool right there on the lab bench. And then once it's cool, I'll restart the video again. I'll show you the salt that's inside the evaporating dish, and we'll take the final mass. All right, so now that my evaporating dish is cool, I'm going to pick it up and show you the salt that formed inside. So hopefully you can see that. You can see the little crystals of salt right around there that formed when the water was evaporated. So all the water's gone, now we just have our salt, and that's what we need the mass of. So I'm going to go ahead and take the mass of the evaporating dish plus the salt, and we'll put that on our data table. So the mass of the evaporating dish plus the salt is 120.38 grams. So that leaves us with around a half a gram of salt alone. So I will let you calculate that. So now you should have all the information that you need to calculate the molarity of the original salt solution.